Tonight we have a very exciting presentation by Frank Cardimen. Mr. Cardimen is a professor at Oakland University and is also the co-founder of the Smart Towns Initiative, which brings academic programs to partners in the community, including the library. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mr. Cardimen.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for being here. And Ron, thank you for the invite to be with the Friends of the Rochester Hills Public Library. Tonight I'm going to take you on a journey. It's a journey into the underbelly of Europe when the Allies decided to try to penetrate Hitler's Europe. I'm going to take you on this journey in a different way than normal. If I can work this thing. I'm going to take you on this journey through the eyes of my uncle. My uncle landed in Africa. He went to Sicily. He went to Salerno. He went to Naples. He went to Florence. He went to France. He went up on the west side of the Vosges. He met up with Patton. He went over to Nuremberg, and he ended the war in Dachau. I tell you this story because he died, as you could see, when he was 56. And my conversation with him about the war occurred one time. It was when I was 15, and that was 1955. And I had just finished the book on Patton. And I was all gung-ho about it. And when my uncle came back, my family, my mother and father, and my aunt, his wife, would say that nobody would talk to him about the war. It was just too traumatic he went through. In fact, the only thing she said was that at the middle of each night, he would awaken screaming. What he went through was something that they couldn't explain, they didn't understand, and he couldn't communicate about it. But when I was 15, I read this book on Patton, and I could see him sitting in the breakfast nook with his white undershirt on, and I said, "Uncle Joe, I just read this book about our greatest general. His name was George Patton." And I said, "He just did so many things, blah, 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 blah." And he put this smirk on his face, and he said, "Yeah, old blood and guts. His guts and my blood." And that was the end of the conversation, but I could still see that smirk on his face. Moved to 2009. In 2009, I went to my Aunt Virginia after all these years of being a historian in World War II. And I said to her, "Do you know the story of my Uncle Joe?" And she said, "No, but there's a box in the bedroom, and he put all of his stuff in there, but we don't know what's in it or what it's all about." And I said to her, I don't want to impose on the two boys. I don't want to impose on you, but if you would like, I would like to do research on what happened to him during this war. So in 2009, I spent 10 months reading the 45th Division, war documents, read 3 or 4 books, and then found some incredible things in this box. My aunt's going to be 101 this week. Okay? Remarkable. And she is just as irascible and as ornery and has just the greatest damn retention. And she's just a terrific, terrific aunt. So the story I'm going to talk about is a story of the 45th Division going into Africa, launching into Sicily, going into Italy, and up into Germany. And I will do it through the eyes of the 45th Division and through his eyes of where he was. And in all my research and his documents, I'm able to place him specifically at a place in the sand, in the town, in the spot at different times. It's not a perfect picture because I didn't get a chance to talk to him. But it is a great story, and it ties into one of the great events that took place prior to the invasion of Sicily, and that was Operation Mincemeat. One of the most incredible stories of how the Brits deceived the Germans by convincing the Germans that the invasion to Europe would be in Sardinia and in Greece and not Sicily. I've read the story, I've seen the movies, I've talked about this thing for so many times. I'm going to tell you tonight about this remarkable story. It ties into my uncle leaving from Africa, going into Sicily. But prior to that, Operation Mincemeat is what was the deception plan for the Allies. So here we have the time frame that I'm going to start us in the war. It's in 43. The Allies planned for the invasion, Operation Mincemeat and Operation Husky. Mincemeat is the deception plan. Husky is the plan to invade Sicily. Germany surrenders in Africa, the Battle of Kursk, but more importantly, Rommel is sent to Greece to defend the invasion, and Operation Mincemeat succeeds. And from July 10 of 43 to August 17, Operation Husky in Sicily is fulfilled. So the presentation tonight is going to be seen through the eyes of the 45th Division. That's the Thunderbird logo. 42 to 43, the U.S. and Allies defeat Germany in Africa. And they had to do it there because there was a great deal of debate between Stalin, Churchill, and Roosevelt. And the debate was, Stalin was insisting on a second front to give him relief. And Churchill did not want to do that because they knew it wasn't going to succeed. They weren't prepared for it. But in order to satisfy Stalin, they sent some Canadians into the little town of Dieppe in France, and they were crucified. And as a result of that, there was a great deal of reluctance to penetrate and go back into Europe until they were ready. The Americans did not want to go into the underbelly. Churchill wanted to go in because he was being confronted by Stalin, and so the politics of that concluded that they should go at least and try and provide a little relief for Stalin and provide some penetration into Europe. So in 43, the invasion of Sicily, the two operations, they then moved into the Salerno region of Italy. They went into Rome, and then because of a conflict at Monte Cassino, they decided to have an amphibious landing in Anzio, at which point two armies came together and they went into Rome, and they liberated Rome on June 4, 1944. 45, they invaded France, and all up in the west side of the Vosges Mountains, and as they crossed over the Rhine into Germany, they had enormous battles until they got to Nuremberg and then got to Dachau and liberated Munich on May 8th. The war ended. So here's a picture of what this particular continent looked like. You can see over here in gray, this is Moscow. They were up to within 12 miles of Moscow. Okay? Hitler made a major decision to pull some of his tank divisions and come down to Kursk to help them out there. That was a major decision not to go into Moscow. But all of this red is Germany-controlled or Germany. Switzerland is independent. Spain is supposed to be independent, but it was mostly controlled by the Germans. And Great Britain is the only place that is part of the Allies. And if you look down in the Mediterranean here, on the east side of Africa, for the most part, at the end of 1942, it was still in battle with the Germans. The west side, over near Oran, was cleared. And the Allies then had an opportunity to meet in January of 43 in Morocco. And the three people who met there, of course, were Churchill, Roosevelt, and Stalin. And the public information that came out of that meeting was that when we defeat the Germans, it will be unconditional surrender, period. But the internal side of the meeting was the deliberation and the preparation for the invasion of the Underbelly. And as I put here very clearly, whoops, excuse me. At the bottom here, the decision to attack Italy was not made without debate. And it was very intense debate as to whether or not they should be doing this at this time. So, the Allies' first major victory was in Africa, but after an enormous battle with Rommel, the Desert Fox, he absolutely destroyed Britain for about a year. But then in 42, November, Montgomery broke through his lines, and that was a result of the Enigma information and a result of being able to dupe again the Germans. November 8, Operation Torch, that's when Eisenhower and Patton entered Africa. They cleared out a lot of the Germans from that area, thus allowing for that conference. And on May 13th, 43, Rommel's end, Germany's defeated. But in March of that year, Rommel went back to Germany. So from March, April, and to May 13, the Germans were left there. In Great Britain, after the battle was won in Africa, Churchill declared, this is not the end, not even the beginning of the end, but is perhaps the end of the beginning. And his conflict was, we're just beginning, we've just been beaten to death. Rommel leaves Africa on March 9, 43. The fall of Tunis, the Axis forces of North America surrendered May 13, and 275,000 German and Italian soldiers were taken prisoner. So now we're in 43. So the question becomes, where will the Allies invade? The conclusion was Sicily. And now how do we get to Sicily from Oran to Sicily, Oran to Sardinia, Oran with the troops over to Greece? And the idea was we're going to go Sicily first and then to Salerno, and and the other way was going to be Sardinia into France. That was the other route that was being talked about. So Sicily was the decision. Okay, let me take you back one step to get my uncle. He goes into the army, and he's in the army at Fort Devens, Mass. And these are all the different camps he visited. He embarked for North Africa in 1943. Now, here are some of the things found in the box. These are pictures of his friends and his people, and little notes of paper that he had in there about the various events and things that were taking place. These are visits of Boston and Massachusetts, we believed. These are pictures of his camp in New York. And he was involved with the 105 artillery. He was in the cannon company. So he was in the background with cannon guns. Pictures of my uncle right here. This is my uncle right here. This is my uncle right here. And these are pictures that he had in the box. More pictures in the box of Camps Pickett and Meade. More postcards and information that he had in the box. This was his final training, the 105 howitzer. And then the Thunderbirds in the 180th Infantry Regiment was off to North Africa. Yep. Oh, I'm sorry. My uncle is right there. Okay. Pardon? I heard somebody. Oh, okay. So, he came in from the U.S., came through the Straits, ended up in Oran. And from Oran, they moved into Sicily. The next stop was the island. Here was his force where he ended up, right around Oran. And then from here, he would go into Sicily. Now,
why would they go from Iran when they had the whole of North when they go something closer?
Well, because, whoops, I got this machine all screwed up here. You have to understand, this was July, and they hadn't quite finished clearing out all of this area over here until just at the end. The plans had to be made so much in advance for the logistics and the planning of the whole thing. So, now, here's the story of how a dead man and a bizarre plan foiled the Nazis and assured Allied victory in Sicily. This is called Operation Mincemeat. Who in war will not have his laugh amid the skulls? That was Winston Churchill. The Germans were easy to deceive. They were deceived in El Alamein, and subsequently to Mincemeat, they were also deceived in Normandy. And the Brits had double agents and had a number of different success stories with the Ultra and the code breaking of the Enigma. And once Churchill got to be prime minister on May 10, 1940, he set up the Double Cross Committee. And all 20 of these reported directly to him. He was a war person. He lived and came up by war. And he had these crazy ideas. And some of his ideas in Normandy and some of his concepts about how you fight a war were just unique. This particular plan was beyond unique. So in wartime, truth is so precious that she should always be guarded or attended by a bodyguard of lies. There's a book out there by Anthony Cave Brown called The Bodyguard of Lies. It is one of my favorite all-time books. I think I've read it 3 times, okay? It's just an incredible story. So, here's the idea. Here's Sardinia. Fake invasion, code name Operation Brimstone, preparatory to invasion of southern Europe. That was one strategy. Sicily, the real invasion, Allied troops landed on 26 beaches along 100 miles of Sicily's south coast. That's here. Greece, fake invasion under command of General Henry Wilson for another fake opportunity. Those are the 3 plans that were out there, and they had to deceive the Germans. Now here was the simple plan. Deceive the Germans that the invasion into southern Europe will be through Sardinia and Greece, not Sicily. How are we going to do that? We're going to do it by using a dead corpse to float ashore in Spain with documents for commanding general in Africa that tells of the Allied European invasion will be in Sardinia and Greece, not Sicily. And after you do that, get the Germans to buy into this deception. Now, the plan was conceived by a writer and a fisherman and a super secret group of 13 people, which was led by the Double X Committee. Now, let me just tell you the requirements for this to work. All right? You need a corpse. You need a coroner who's going to stay quiet. You need a pathologist who's going to stay quiet. You need a specially designed container to make sure the body functions properly once you drop it in the water in hopes that it gets on shore. You have to identify a corpse and create a person. You need convincing documents. You need a submarine. At first, the plan was to drop him by airplane because this guy was conceived of as a pilot who was downed in the Mediterranean. But they decided to drop him by way of a submarine. You need proper tides and winds to make sure when you drop him in the water, he goes on shore. I mean, did you ever think about that? You need to drop the corpse off in the ocean at the proper spot for the corpse to float ashore without being seen by German U-boats. You need Spanish authorities, listen to this one, to autopsy the body incorrectly. And they did. You need, where am I? You need Spanish to sympathize with Germany to deliver the documents to German intelligence in Spain. You need the Germans to buy into the deception and communicate to headquarters in Germany. And you need the German headquarters to accept the ruse and reposition its forces in Greece and southern France. Simple plan, and a few people must know. Here's the story. This guy, Montague, was a naval officer, and he was part of the 20 Committee. He came up with the idea of Operation Mincemeat. He got final approval from Churchill. And in the book, he never revealed the identity of the corpse. A commandant, he was the officer who had this mind and created the story behind the guy. And he planned this. His plan was presented to the 20 Committee when he said, we'll obtain a body from a London hospital, dress it up in a military uniform, fill the corpse's lungs with water, provide it with misleading documents, and then drop it in from an aircraft, they changed that, so that it will be washed up on the coast of Spain. After all, live agents could be tortured. A corpse would never confess. Okay? So, nothing to this plan. Here was the corpse. He was born in 09. I don't know if I say that right. Aberbrigad, South Wales. He was a father of a coal miner. His mother and father never married. Mother had syphilis prior to his birth. Father died of TB, lived on charity with mother and siblings, was not eligible for military service. Mother died in 1940. He moved to London. He was a vagrant, mental illness, ingested rat poison, assumed suicide. He was found in an abandoned warehouse near King's Cross in London. He died in January 28, 1943 in St. Pancras Hospital. He was kept frozen and secret until April 43. He died of rat poison. His affected liver and caused fluid to build up in his lungs, consistent with death at sea, unless the autopsy done with advanced science. It wasn't. Now the corpse's new identity. He was named Captain William Martin. He was provided with family, conflict with father, Marine Regiment, contact with the branch manager. He was a solicitor. He had a smoking habit, and he had Catholic religion. The corpse was the same side as Commandale. He began wearing the uniform of Royal Marines that would dress the corpse in, so the uniform would look suitably worn, including his underwear. Okay? That's the degree and the detail that they went to try and convince the Germans that this guy was for real. This guy over on the right, Ronnie Reed, was an MI5 case officer who looked just like this guy. And so that was his card, and this identity card was found on the body when he was picked up. The coroner pathologist. These are the two guys that had to take care of this thing. I have read, I don't know that I can say it was confirmed, but I have read that it was Churchill himself who talked to both of these guys and told them what they had to do. And told them not only what they had to do, but how they had to keep it secret. And so the task was, find a body no one will claim that will appear as if drowned, keep it frozen and out of sight of other medical officials for 4 months. That's how secret it has to be. They had to design a canister to transport the body. And they did, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. They created his lover. She was the MI5 secretary. And they had pictures of her and love letters written. They also, and this is an interesting character, Jewel was the commander of the Seraph that transported the body. And he became very good friends with Mark Clark, who began the 5th Division after Patton left. And he led the Allied invasion as the guide ship for the invasion. But his role was to take the body, drop it off in Spain, and while it was on that submarine, he told the staff that it was an optical weather device. Believe that one. And by the way, his, what was it, the conning tower, that's what I was looking for. The conning tower memorial of the Seraph is in the Citadel. And it's the only place where the Royal Navy ensign allowed to fly in the United States. That was his connection with Mark Clark, who then became president of the Citadel later on. Okay, that was just a little piece of information. Some of the Germans, some of the key players who were part of this whole ruse, don't need to go through much, but here was the letter that was on Martin that read like this. I promise, blah, 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 that Major Martin would arrange with you in the onward transmission of a letter he has with General Alexander. It's very urgent, very hot, and as there are some remarks and it could not be seen by others in the office, it could not go by signal. I feel sure that you will see that goes on safely and without delay. I think you will find Martin the man you want. He is quiet and shy at first, but he really knows his stuff. He was more accurate than some of us about the probable run of events in Dieppe, and he has been well in all experiments with the latest barges and equipment which should take place in Scotland. Let me have his back. Let me have him back, please, as soon as the assault is over. He might bring some sardines with him that are on point here. The reference of sardines, then, of course, is Sardinia. The Germans bought it. This was a letter from Mountbatten, Command Operations, to the Admiral of the Fleet in the Mediterranean. This was a checklist of all the items in the corps that they had identified beforehand and that they had created a way in which they were going to control and were able to tell afterwards whether the Germans penetrated any of the documents or any of the piece of equipment. And they had ways to do that. Here are the love letters from Pam. Beautiful love letters. Bill, darling, that was nice. Letter from his father with the conflict with his father. His father's trying to argue with him. The transition. Here's London. Actually, this is Wales, I'm sorry. He goes to London. He goes up to Scotland. The Seraph takes him all the way down to Spain. He's dropped off in Huelva, which is on 30th April 43. It gets to Madrid on 8 May. Letters attached from the envelopes are handed to the Abwehr. The Abwehr is the German military. By the 11th, the German report describes Mincemeat's documents as absolutely convincing. And the canister was filled with dry ice. When evaporated, it created a carbon dioxide and drove out any oxygen, preserving the body without refrigeration. Now, this body was frozen for 4 months. And they had to come up with a special container. Here is these are pictures from the Seraph when they dropped him into the water. And here is Huelva down here. Where is it? I can't find it. There it is, right there. And this is the picture of how it goes through the river. Now, they read the 39th Psalm. That was just part of it, and I'll read that to you later. But the thing is, they dropped him in the water, and they had to know something about tides and all that, because 4 years later, 4 years later, sorry, thank you. 4 years later, 4 hours later, he ends up on shore. 4:30 in the morning, he gets dropped. 9:30, the corpse is washed ashore, found by a local fisherman. Next day, an autopsy was done. Conclusion, drowning at sea for the last 8 to 10 days. Remember, this guy was frozen for 4 months, okay? The British notified the Spain of a downed pilot, acknowledged and given a military funeral and burial in Huelva. The British dignitaries attended the funeral. British urgent request to the Spanish was, we want our documents back. And it took them 21 days to get it back. Now, back in the newspapers, if you can see right here, it said killed in action, Royal Marines, Captain Major W. Martin. That was to make sure the Germans had a tie-in to what the Brits were saying. The death certificate read in Spain, blah, 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 death by drowning. Here is his grave, where they had the ceremony around it, okay? So, sequence of events. The 30th is when he was found. By the 8th, the fake letters landed in the Germans' lap. By the 9th, Kuhlenthal made copies of the documents, got it up to von Rohn, one of Hitler's most trusted intelligence officers. And the question that was raised in all of my readings was whether or not Rohn really believed it or not. But he considered that it was real, and they decided then to move the military to Greece and to Lower France for the invasion. Bottom line was, von Roon was part of the deadly crew that tried to assassinate Hitler on July 20, 1944, and therefore he was executed. On May 10, Spain turned over the documents to the British naval attaché, and by the 21st, the documents returned to London, microscopically evaluated for their seal and fold of envelopes by British intelligence. Documents were tampered. Mincemeat swallowed whole. Now, I go back to all this thing. All of these things were required to make it work. The next piece of it was need Germany headquarters to accept the ruse and reposition its forces to Greece and southern France. Would they bite? And sure enough, by May 11, Bletchley, in the breaking of the Enigma Code, had the answer. The answer was that the invasion will be in Greece and Sardinia. As Churchill said, on the day the Germans took the bait, Mincemeat swallowed rod, line, and sinker. And Morgenthau, the guy who started this plan, was not told about the Enigma machine and the results of that. He didn't find out about it until a couple years after the war ended, when they got the documents in Germany and realized that, in fact, the Germans bit on this whole ruse. So, Rommel sent down to Greece, 3 panzer divisions to Greece, 1 from France and 2 from Eastern Front and Russia. 2 weeks later, the Germans remained convinced that the main attacks would come from Greece and Sardinia. Operation Husky, July 10, 23, concluded. Everybody but a bloody fool would know that American and Britons would attack Sicily. That was Churchill at his best. Every year in April, an Englishwoman from the town of Huelva lays flowers. 1997, the man who never was became known. His name was Glyndwr Michael, and he served as Major Martin. Today, they added to his stone, Gwenville Michael served as Major William Martin, RN. Okay? You served up Psalm 29. I will put a muzzle on my mouth while in the presence of the wicked, so I remain utterly silent, not even saying anything good. Those were the words that were presented when he was put in the water. Yes? They knew from his research when they found him in London, but they just wouldn't reveal it to anybody until later years. So, the deception worked. Thousands of Allied soldiers saved in Sicily, and deception worked again on D-Day. So now, finally, back to my uncle in the 45th Division, we're going to invade Sicily. And we're going to go from Africa into Sicily, and right here is the 45th Division. And the 45th Division will go right in here at, I forget the name of that, Songalidi. Let me see if the next one shows me. Yeah, that's even. Yeah, Scolidi, yeah. So, back to this one again for a second. We'll go over here. The game plan for the invasion was when the 45th entered Scolidi, the game plan was to follow Montgomery on the west side of Mount Etna, which is right here. He was going to go up the east coast like this to get to Messina. And Patton's original plans were to follow him like this and protect him from the west. Patton had a different idea. And this is where he even went against Eisenhower and all of them, because he did it so fast they couldn't stop him. He decides that he isn't going to be playing into that British plan. He's going to get to Messina first. And not only is he going to get to Messina first, he's going to cut across the entire island to Palermo, and my uncle went up to Cefalu, and then he's going to have an amphibious landing in here and get to Messina before Montgomery does. And he does it. He gets there hours before Montgomery. And so he's hailed as the conqueror, and Montgomery comes in second hand. That led to a lot of problems. A lot of problems. Here's the boarding ships from Iran. And these are archival files from the 45th. What I do know is that one of these ships my uncle was on, and it could have been this one, I'm not sure, but I do know it was one of these ships. This is a military map. What I can tell you is the 45th is right here, the 45th Division, 7th Army landings. Patton was in charge of the 7th Army. He was commanded by, I lost his name, but anyhow, it was Bradley, thank you. Whoever said that, it was Bradley, yeah. That reversed later on, but that's the way it was there. So if you look at the next one, here's the 45th up in the Sicily. And then if you look at this one, and this will drive you a little bonkers here, because it took me a while to figure it out. The 45th stayed right in here, and then decided to go forward all the way from here, all the way up through and into here where the 45th ended up, and my cousin, or my uncle, ended up in Sicily. How do I know that? These are his pictures in Sicily. He was there at that time when the 45th was. These are some actual pictures from some 180th Infantry photos of what they went through. These are more pictures from the archives of soldiers there. And at the end of the battle, Patton was able to recognize the 45th, and these particular documents were in my uncle's box. And they're really high recognition of what the 45th did. And the lead agency of the 45th was the 157th, not the 180th. The 180th that he was in was a backup to the 157th. Although they got into a lot of major skirmishes, that's the way it was. After that happened, Patton was out, I think most of you know the story, but Patton was out to some of the Red Cross tents, and a couple of the guys were having trouble with bombs and were reacting like they were just shell-shocked. And he refused to allow them to stay in the tent. And he wanted to get rid of them, and he pulled his gun. He was ready to pull his gun and shoot them because he thought they were cowards. And he had all these other men around him with missing arms and legs and, you know, really hurting. And these guys didn't have a scratch, but they just couldn't handle it. And he slapped them across the face with his gloves. And if it weren't for the doctors and some of the nurses, he may have shot them. That's how upset he was. He did it twice. Feedback got to Eisenhower and the American public, and Eisenhower was told by General Pershing, who was in charge of the military in Washington, D.C. Did I say Pershing? It wasn't Pershing. Marshall, thank you. Had the wrong one, wrong war. Yeah. And Marshall said to Eisenhower, keep him, do what you want. If you want him to come back home, send him back home, because we're not going to accept that as part of how we're going to run this army. So he lost the 7th Army. And Eisenhower put him out and had him travel the Mediterranean, had him doing other things because the Germans feared Patton more than any other general in the war. Totally feared him, and were so convinced when they set up the deception plan for D-Day, and they put Patton in charge of FUSOG, the first U.S. Army group, which was a fictional army. He was in charge. Patton was in charge, and the Germans knew that the only invasion leader that would make the invasion into Europe would be Patton. Eisenhower used him as a decoy and did it very effectively. So he now loses. Mark Clark comes in and takes over the 7th, and they now call it the Army 5th. August 17, welcome news. Messina falls to the Allies. Sicilian campaign ends. So the next move then is from Sicily into Salerno. By the way, most people think that the Allies, and particularly Americans, got into Europe the first time by way of D-Day in Normandy. And it wasn't so. It was here in Italy. The first time Americans landed in Europe after World War I in 1917, excuse me. So here are some of the dates. Salerno, Naples from the 14th of September. Anzio, January 27. Rome, June 4. In between there were battles of hell. How anybody survived, I don't know. I really don't. Here's Sicily. Here again is the 45th. They're going to penetrate right through here into Salerno. Clark is leading them. He took over for General Patton because of his slapping incidents. And they left from Palermo. They went from Cefalo to Palermo and then into Salerno in Italy. Here was the command structure with Mark Clark. Here's the 45th Division Commander, Middleton. Here are the key, just some archival pictures. But they were waging mud in Salerno. It was ugly. Here was an article about that, and it said that the 45th Division, 180th, which landed early on the 14th, was in reserve near Mount Soprano. Again, following the 157th, following the 157th. Here's Mount Soprano, 3,000 feet above sea level. When you look at Soprano here, this is on the coast, and this is where the 45th resided, and were then moved up when 157th was injured. This came from the 180th Infantry book. These are pictures of Salerno. This is a little side light now, a little side point based on timing. About October 43, 1 month after Italy surrendered to the Allied forces, it declared war on Nazi Germany. Its one-time Axis power partner, Italy, was led by Benito Mussolini, and he had formed an alliance with Nazi Germany. But 1 month after that, the Italians switched gears. They went to support the Allies. And Mussolini was protected by the Germans for a while until he was captured up near Lago di Como, Lake Como. And there he was brought back, and he was killed by the partisans, and he was taken to Milano. And on the street in Milano, he and his girlfriend and a bunch of his cohorts were hung upside down and stoned to death. Actually, that's not really true. He was already dead. They just stoned him. Here's a picture of Mount Vesuvius, and this is from the Bay of Naples. This is from Naples in front of us here. And the distance between Salerno and Naples by the crow flying is 30 miles, so it's not that far. Now, in the box were these rocks, these lava rocks, and Roman coins from Mount Vesuvius. Here's again a picture of my uncle right here. Here's a picture of my uncle also with, I think, a priest, but I can't tell for sure. We think it was in the Naples area because it was tied to some information that was from Naples. Here's an incredible story that was in the box. This little document right here was given to him by some parents whose child was saved by my uncle. And these people went to the donut dollies, because there were a lot of them there, the nurses who would write for the local people. They would write for the soldiers to send articles back home. They would kind of dictate to the nurses, and the nurses would write it up and then send it home. Well, let me read what it says here. It says, 1906 was the largest eruption in modern times that Vesuvius had. It was also noted in the beautiful colored lava, so there are 3 figures from this eruption. I hope that the bracelet you safely because, and it's all broken up. I can't make out the words. Now I'm going to tell you something nice. Whenever I get the chance, I'll send you a little trinket. You probably won't care for it too much, but it's about the most beautiful thing I've seen in all the time that I've been in Italy. It's a bracelet, but it's rather unusual. It got a great history. The small cameos, like figures, are only about 1/3 of an inch. They are made from the lava of Vesuvius eruptions. There are 11 figureheads, all of a different color. The figures are ancient goddess of mythology. They are supposed to be mounted in sterling silver covered with a thin gold shell. The bits of lava are from the eruptions of 1766, 67, 79, 94, 22, 72, 906, and 1924. And that is the bracelet that was in a tin cup that my aunt had no knowledge existed and had no knowledge about its relevance. Now, it has great value. There's no question. The latest eruption was in 1944. Was in 1944 Mount Vesuvius. And that particular eruption was while the Allies were there. But it didn't do much damage from what I could tell, and what the readings we have is that it just damaged a few planes and a lot of the particles in the air, damaged a few things, but it wasn't so bad for the Allies. Here's some more of his pictures. While he had a little time off in Naples, they went over to Pompeii and Herculaneum. And so these are his writings of where he was. And again, pictures that he had in the box. So we got across to Capri. Anybody been to Capri? Yeah, okay. So you know the geography there. Yeah, here's Sorrento, here's Capri, here's the Bay of Naples. Right over here is the Mount Vesuvius. So the next move was from Naples up to Rome. And what happened was, because of the geography in Italy with the mountains right in here, okay, the Germans would go ahead and they would create defensive positions in the mountains until the Allies would come up and take it. And the most difficult one was the Gustav Line. And it says here at Monte Cassino and the Garigliano and Rapido rivers was called the Gustav Line, composed of interlocking bunkers and fortification. It was by far the most formidable of the three lines. That was at Monte Cassino. Anybody been to Monte Cassino? No. Okay. It's up on a mountain. It's an abbey. It's been back there since, I think, 924. Okay? And they used it, the Germans used it as a defensive position. And the Allies just couldn't get through. They made 3 or 4 major attempts and just couldn't get through. So the idea was then, I can find this right, the idea was, here's Naples, let's do an amphibious from here to Anzio, Circumum, where the Monte Cassino was here, and have this army, the Fifth Army, come up and then hook up with them and go into Rome. Well, there's a tremendous story, and someday I'll tell you the details of the story, because when the general got into Anzio, there was no distance between him and Rome. They could have walked right into Rome. But he believed that Mark Clark wanted him to wait. And he waited there, and he got bombed for 3 months and got the hell knocked out of him. And Mark Clark had very difficult time in Monte Cassino. Finally got through. And the people who took the brunt of that were the Polish army, took the major brunt of that. So the Battle of Anzio was a result of the movement to circumvent the Germans and pick up or connect with the 45th going up the center of the state. You see, from Monte Cassino to Rome, there's just one road that can get you through there because of the mountains. It's a Liri Valley, and that's the path they had to go through. But to get through it, they had to get around the mountain and the defense, and they just couldn't get through easily. So they were fighting like hell to get through, but it didn't happen until June 4th. Now, the Anzio landings occurred on the 27th, 44. This map here is March 29, 44, and there's the 180th right there. So they were there almost 3 months plus, with big guns coming in from Rome, and they were just beaten to hell. Anyhow, these are some pictures from the 180th Infantry archival pictures. Anzio in 44. The landing was in January. Rome was finally liberated 6 months later on June 4, 1944. Here's a little description of what was going on in the 45th, the 157th, and 179th. And the comment, and this is a document from the archives, the written document from the 45th Division. And it says, while the 180th Infantry rebuffed lighter attacks, they did those kind of things by following up behind them. Here was Monte Cassino, the significant battle. There's great controversy over the strategy. And as I said, oh yeah, St. Benedict Abbey was 524. Excuse me, it's mine. I didn't turn it off. Sorry about that. I'm sorry. Let me turn this off. Okay. Back to Monte Cassino. Sorry. Okay. So beyond that, Rome was liberated June 4, 1944. These are pictures from the 180th. Here's Mark Clark right here. This is the Roman Colosseum and soldiers entering the gates on the 5th. They had a parade in Rome on the 5th of June. Okay? And this is, of course, the Colosseum. On June 4, the infantry was outside the city proper. You can see the Vatican here. This is the city, the old town, the city of Rome. Here is the 180th, lined up right in here, outside the walls. Now, outside of Rome, if anybody travels and does any kind of cruising in the Mediterranean, the seaport out of Rome is called Civitavecchia. And it goes from here out to here. This is the town of Civitavecchia. And after Rome fell, the Fifth Army sent fighting units over to take Civitavecchia. My uncle was there. And the reason I know that is because on the 6th, he writes this note to his brother in the box. That was in the box too. And he writes to his brother, he says, Ed, so how are you doing? How do you like the something on the front of this? Oh, he was a first lieutenant in the German army when that picture was taken. I picked him up on the dock in Rome, also picked up the swastika emblem that's enclosed in the letter. I'm still feeling all right. Hope you are still doing well. Sincerely, your big brother, Joe. This is what he did. He captured this guy and some information from him. Look at the date. June 6, 1944. The invasion of Normandy. Okay? Mark Clark thought going into Rome and liberating Rome, he was going to be the new Caesar. But he got short-sighted there because Normandy was going to be the big event. So, June 6 to August 15 appears rest and relaxation in Rome and seaborne training for the invasion of France. I know that because here are his pictures again that was in the box. The invasion of France would be through Saint Maxime. And they were going to do an amphibious landing, and the 45th Division was to link up with the 3rd Army advancing from Normandy and joining the two forces at Dijon. And against slight opposition, it spearheaded the drive to Belfort Gap. The 45th Infantry Division took the strongly defended city of Epinal on 24 September. So here is the route that they took. This is France right here. And they went up on the west side of the Vosges Mountains. And here's Strasbourg. So they went to the west of that. And they went up to this level here before they moved in, crossed the Rhine, and then went into Germany. A couple pictures in the box. And we think those pictures are from Epinal. After the battle there, they were able to come up with some things near Strasbourg. So, again, not clear. Just can't be sure of some of this stuff. So they went in at this place near Worms. They went up to Koningschen. They came down to Bamberg, Nuremberg, and down to Munich. And they entered Germany on December 14, 3+ months to get to the Rhine. Patton could have gotten there a whole lot sooner. But what happened was they couldn't get him enough fuel for his equipment. And he was stealing it from the Brits to keep moving forward. And not Montgomery, but Eisenhower got pretty ticked off and told him to stop and not to go into Germany. Well, he urinated on the Rhine to convince the world that he was there first, okay? Just to prove his point, whatever that was. Anyhow, these pictures were in the box, and I can't be sure of where they are. These were his pictures, and I think these were in Nuremberg, but I'm not sure. These were pictures taken by that I had in the archives. And the 180 cleared the stadium of the German defenders in bitter fighting and captured it on April 20, 45. Now, if you look at this place down here, and you've seen the movies and everything where where Hitler would stand up and speak to 100,000 people out in the audience, I stood there when I went to Nuremberg. It's an incredible sight. And when you think about 100,000 people in military and that whole operation, there had to be this great feeling of exaltation and that he was the king, he was the leader of this great military and great army. Well, he got defeated there. These are pictures of Nuremberg courthouse where the Nuremberg trials took place at the fall of 45. This was a Dachau concentration camp. Now here's a story about this. The night before, they were just on the outskirts of Dachau. Anybody been to Dachau? Yeah, okay, a few of us. And the next day, the 157th went in to free and liberate the camp. And while they were there, my uncle got in on the 2nd or 3rd of May. I know he says over here, this is his documents. He said May 45. The readings I have, I couldn't be sure if it was May 2nd or May 3rd. Doesn't make a lot of difference, but they were in there 2 or 3 days after the 157th. And these were pictures of the original crematoria. These are also pictures that were taken on Dachau, but they were archival pictures, not my uncle's. You can see the bodies. Here's another story about the pictures. My uncle was given a gift by one of the inmates. It was a purse, and it was a purse of human skin. And I told my aunt, you can't keep this. We got to get this to the Jewish memorials. And she said, when I die, 101, when I die, you send it to them. I said, okay, I will. So a lot of pain and a lot of suffering. Now, when the 157th went in there, they were not a very kind group to the Germans. And it created what is called the Dachau massacre of 45. And once Patton learned about it, he said, I don't want to hear anything about it. I will not convict any of them, period. Here's what happened. The cremation onion ovens, which were still in operation when the soldiers arrived, contained bodies and skeletons. Some of the victims apparently had died hours before 45th entered the camp and lay where they had died in states of decomposition that overwhelmed the soldier senses. Here is the report that came from Howard Buchner. The following is a summary of the fate of the German garrison at Dachau. Shot on the spot, 122. Killed by camp inmates, 40. Machine gun by bird eye, I'm not sure I know what that is, 12. Machine gun, 346. Totally executed, 520. Killed in combat, those trying to fight, 30. Escaped temporarily, 10. So 560 of those were killed at this camp. May 8th, Germany surrenders. VE Day in Europe. On the 7th and 8th, they went into Munich and they liberated Munich. So on the 8th, my uncle was in Dachau and Munich. I don't know exactly where he was on the 8th, but I know he was in Dachau from the 3rd on. I just don't know which is where he paraded or not in this thing. So on May 8th, 1945, VE Day, for my Uncle Joe, the war is over. For others, they gave the supreme sacrifice. On May 8th to September, his military duties and travel departed from Le Havre, France for home. He got home on September 10, 1945. Again, my uncle was over here. Of this unit, I was told, I don't know, I was told that less than 4 of them survived the whole war. And I don't know how my uncle survived. The battles he participated in were just overwhelming. So let me give you a little addendum to the box. Other items found in the box. Absolutely pristine pictures of Hitler and Goering. Pictures of Hitler down here. Looks like Bavarian, probably in Berchtesgaden, but I'm not sure. Hitler with children. Hitler with the previous prime minister, the previous German leader. Hindenburg. I was von Hindenburg. That's the word I was looking for. Thank you. Also, pristine pictures. I mean, they're like they were just brand new. More pictures that were in there. Again, here's Hitler. Here's Goering. Here's Hitler. I don't know who this one is. More German pictures. This, of course, is Nuremberg. I know that, and this is the parade in Nuremberg. Don't know where that is. This is a picture that was in the box of the German officers who were standing in front of the Eiffel Tower in 42. And some other pictures that nobody knows about. We have no idea who they were. More pictures. Couldn't figure out where, or there was no indication of where they were from or just how he got them. I told you about the young boy that he saved in Naples. He also helped a young boy in Germany with food. And these are notes and pictures of Armin. And he wrote to my uncle in 1950. He remembered my uncle with that note. And these are pictures of Armin. But we're unsure if Armin was Germany or Italy. We think it was Germany. My Uncle Joe and Aunt Virginia lost touch with Armin during the 50s. With no last name, it is impossible for us to search for him and his family. We just don't have enough information. This was a note in the box. All of his battles that he was in. He just wrote them and just put the dates that he visited at. This was his discharge papers. He got home on 17th of October. On the 26th, he married my aunt. He said, by God, she stayed with me through the war, and I think I'm going to reward her by marrying her. Okay? So both of them were very special to me. My aunt was the one who baptized me, and my uncle was the one who stood up for me for my confirmation. So they were very close to me, and she is still very close to me. She's the only one left in my family, on that side of the family. Some booty that he brought back. I have all of those. I've used and shot the German Luger. I've researched the various pieces of the German Luger. In the leather case are these words. It looks like Gorler, Werkm something. We couldn't figure it out. My son and I researched for 2 weeks all the German military officers, all the cities in Germany, trying to figure out how we could get this gun back to that family. We just can't make it happen. We just don't know how to get that information to them. I put up my uncle's name in the World War II honor roll. I also put him down in the World War II museum. Here's the piece that I was trying to get to you that he had in the box. Was this little note that he carried with him throughout the whole battle. And I want to read this one to you because in his own writing he says, there is no glory in war and no beauty in the crusades of men. Man cannot survive except through his mind. He comes on earth unarmed. His brain is his only weapon. Animals obtain food by force. Man has no claws, no fangs, no horns, no great strength of muscle. He must plant his food or hunt it. To plant, he needs a process of thought. From the simplest necessity to the highest religious abstractions, from the wheel to the skyscrapers, everything we have comes from a simple attribute of man, the function of his reasoning brain. To me, that is one of the most beautiful summations of why war is so bad. And he experienced it. He was one of them. There are thousands of these men who fought in that war, who had similar stories that he had. This was my final note to my aunt and to my cousins. And what I did is I had a dinner and presentation for them because the grandkids knew nothing. The two sons knew nothing. My aunt knew nothing until 2010. His journey was incredible. He witnessed the horrors of war for 3 years and 8 months, trying to free Europeans from the brutality of Nazis. He fought for his country to help preserve peace at home, protecting us from evil. His generation was the greatest generation by Tom Brokaw, and I agree. I offer this tribute to my aunt and her family as a reminder of what my Uncle Joe experienced and sacrificed in World War II, based on his own pictures, my research, and my travels. It is not a perfect picture because there are so many questions unanswered. It was a labor of love. I only wish I could have asked him so many questions that I have about his pictures, the people, and his incredible journey that so many other young American boys embarked upon, but never made back home to the U.S. after the war. I thank you for letting me share this story, and I thank Ron and the Friends of the Library for all that you do for the library and our community. And it's a story of a past generation that really helped save the Western world. So thank you for allowing me to speak tonight.